It is my pleasure to introduce President Hugh B. Brown as the baccalaureate, to give the baccalaureate sermon. Brother Brown is a man of wonderful experience as a mission president, a missionary, serving in the armed forces in time of war, an author of several books, now devoting his life to the ministry of the Lord Jesus Christ.
President Smith, President Wilkinson, members of the faculty and honored guests, members of the graduating class, and brothers and sisters. First, I bring to you the greeting, the love, and the blessing, and the gratitude of President David O. McKay, who regrets his inability to be here tonight. We are all proud and happy the wonderful work you are doing here in this institution, upholding the standards set so long ago and advancing the great cause of education. As you were coming in, I was impressed with the number of various nations and nationalities represented here tonight. You know, sometimes we spend a little time in a country and get some ideas as to what kind of people live there, but to come to know them better, you need to get them into a college or in business with them. And sometimes we come away from some countries with wrong impressions. For instance, some time ago, a man paid his first visit to the British Isles. And he said, you know, they're rather strange over there in Britain. There's different kinds of people. For instance, in Scotland, the Scotch won't wear rubber heels because they give. And the Irish don't know what they want, but they're ready to fight for it. And the Welsh pray on their knees on Sunday and on their neighbors all the rest of the time. And then there's the English. They're self-made men, and they worship their creators. So I say sometimes we get a wrong impression. I'm indebted to Dr. Parley A. Christensen for bringing to attention in his last book a statement made by Matthew Arnold. He said, I am tormented with a desire to put a whole book into a page, and a whole page into a phrase, and a whole phrase into a word. I think he expressed your wishes tonight for me as you approach the ordeal of listening to a baccalaureate sermon. And knowing something of your penchant for the concise, the compact, the neat in expression, I'm tormented with a desire to put a whole sermon into a few words. And to that end, I sincerely and humbly seek divine guidance and pray for your patience and sympathy. While it's sometimes misleading for a speaker to give a name or a title to his talk, I think of two words. They're unrelated, but they may give some idea of what I might possibly say. They are be aware and beware. If I was an advertising man, I'd say, wake up and live. Don't let down your guard. But I've chosen the other, and it may give you some hope of brevity. Now, to make sure that we'll have some capsules of truth, I shall quote what others have said, although that will probably emphasize the distinction between the original and that which is quoted. One professor said it rather well to his hopeful student. He said, "Your manuscript is good and original, but what's original isn't good, and what's good isn't original." Now, we who have almost finished the parts assigned to us on life's stage find it difficult to resist the impulse to look back across the stage to you who are just entering that stage. And sometimes looking back causes nostalgia, but we look forward too. And we look forward with some apprehension, knowing that science is placed in the hands of irresponsible and sometimes wicked men the power to destroy our civilization. But though the future does look somewhat ominous, we have confidence that you who are to meet that future will be equal to it. For science and religion have placed in your hands some tools, physical, mental, moral, and spiritual tools, with which to meet that future, and therefore the outlook brightens, and what seemed ominous becomes auspicious. Cicero reminds us, and I shall read a word from him, each stage of existence has been allotted its own appropriate quality, so that the weakness of childhood, the impetuosity of youth, the seriousness of middle life, the maturity of old age, each bears some of nature's fruit, which must be garnered in its own season. Each has something which ought to be enjoyed in its own time. Now, the exit from this stage where we stand is the entrance to another stage. In other words, we're going somewhere. Now, I don't want you to prognosticate on where, but we're on our way. Every exit is an entrance, and vice versa. And therefore, you who are coming onto this stage have just had an exit from another. We almost envy you the next 50 years. And the events of this day, when an astronaut made a triple trip around the globe, and when we try to anticipate what may happen in that next 50 years, we feel, as President McKay said the other day as he was sitting in his car and we were talking of conditions as they are and as they are to be, he lifted his hands and said, "Oh, I wish I had another 50 years to live." And so we almost envy you. Now, we, your teachers and your elders, are about to vacate the pilot seat and turn over the controls to you. The pilots, your teachers, are going to bail out. And I hope none of you will hope their parachutes don't function, even though you may blame them for some of the turbulence of the last few years. First, then, we say to you, beware, be aware. The degree of your awareness will indicate the measure of your aliveness. There are some people who have eyes but see nothing, ears that do not hear, hearts that do not understand. No day will dawn for any man who does not awake, and no dream will ever come true for you if you only dream. One successful man said there are 3 rules for success: work, work, work. If you would be consciously and acutely alive, you must resolve to keep eternally busy. While our challenge is to be aware, our caution is to beware. Beware of the deceptive thought that you have arrived, that your education is complete, that there's no need for further effort. You're just beginning, and that's true of all of us. We warn you, too, to beware of the insidious hardening of intellectual arteries, which results from lack of use. It's important that we seek to learn something of life's source, its purpose, and its potential destiny. As one learns to discriminate and to choose, and choosing involves rejecting from among life's various and varied offerings, he progressively learns to savor life. And that keeps his taste buds functioning with a satisfying keenness. You've learned already that life and learning involves some unlearning. There's some things you thought you knew that you have discovered you did not know, and that process will continue too. One wise old man, though he was untaught, said something true. It ain't my ignorance that done me up. It's what I knowed that wasn't so. And so all of us will have to come to learn and unlearn. Those of you who would leave footprints in the sands of time must not sit, especially on stepping stones. All of you are aware that every landing field is also a runway for a takeoff. You must resist the temptation to abide at any intermediate goal. There can be no loitering on life's airfield. You either get on the plane or you get left behind. Again, be aware. As you become progressively aware of yourselves, your universe, the purpose of your being, you envision certain goals, certain ideals toward which to work. If you enthrone high ideals in your mind, they will mirror your destiny and will become part of you. Know thyself, said the poet. Presume not God to scan. The proper study of mankind is mad. And so we bring to you tonight the thought that as you become aware of yourself, study yourselves, your potential, something innate within you, you will find that there's beauty and music which was Creator planted in your hearts and souls. And the loveliness which enshrouds your purest thoughts and finest impulses will make you humbly grateful. And you'll become, as you become aware of the latent beauty of the soul of man, you'll become inquisitive and seek for life's unexplained mysteries. You'll be proud and grateful, proud that you are a part of it all, and you can think and ponder and stand in awe and reverence. The human body has been said to be God's greatest miracle, and the human mind is the finest instrument in all the universe. No brain specialist can tell you how the brain works with that instrument. We know that a man is conscious, self-active, creative, something. And to find what that something is our task, and then work on it. Certainly then, if this is man, he is not less important than the infinitesimal electron. I quote from Leon Guterman of the Wisdom magazine, or read from him for a moment. He said, "The wise man protects his brain." Of course, that may be assuming for some of us. Yesterday I wasn't too well. Some of the brethren were a little anxious. And one of them suggested the possibility of a brain hemorrhage. And the doctor said, "That's impossible without a brain." Guterman says, the wise man protects his brain and his mind. For the mind is the manipulator of the brain. From all that would do it harm, you must protect it. Ignorance is a vice, a form of self-inflicted injury that leaves its mark of weakness on the brain. Ignorance means brain decay. Seek wisdom and understanding with a faith-hungry heart. It's the end of Guterman's quotation. Stupidity, someone has said, is inexcusable. Elbert Hubbard said, "Genius may have limitations, but stupidity is not thus handicapped." And another has said, "Better be unborn than untaught, for ignorance is the root of all troubles." You know, wisdom has a stimulating effect on the brain. It helps to lift us above ourselves, our petty individual aims and narrow and selfish desires. The pursuit of wisdom is at once a humbling and an ennobling work. Humbling because we can accomplish so little in the space of a lifetime, and ennobling because the glory of God is intelligence. And seeking and gaining wisdom and knowledge leads to the glory of intelligence. To lack wisdom is no disgrace. To lack a desire for wisdom is a pity. But to seek wisdom and not know where to find it is a tragedy. The human soul, body and spirit united, is the most transcendent of all God's creations. Beside it, the vaunted works of man are puny and insignificant. Beware, then, of the stifling pride which may be engendered by your admiration of man's capacity. The so-called self-made men, they're endurable as long as they don't worship their Creator, as did the English. He who would enrich his personality and live abundantly must glorify his intelligence with the warmth and beauty of love. Love of God and love of fellow men. In other words, the head must support the heart, and vice versa. Someone has said the education of the heart is the heart of education. The greatest heart that ever beat in mortality was the educated heart of Jesus. The greatest sermon that was ever preached appealed to the hearts of those favored listeners. And the same appeal has come down through the ages in all the languages of the world. The Apostle Paul, in his matchless chapter on love, and that chapter came from an educated heart and a well-furnished mind. But he said, eloquence of men and of angels without love is a sounding brass and tinkling cymbal. That knowledge and faith, though it be sufficient to move mountains, is ineffective without love. And further, that bestowing your goods, though it be lavish and sacrificial, if it lack love, it will profit nothing. But while we admonish you to love your fellow men, we earnestly warn you against love's counterfeit. Passionate lust is the most poisonous and debasing of all of Satan's allurements. Young men and women, as you associate together, let every thought and word and action be so clean and pure that though all the world should know, you'd have no embarrassment. Remember, you must live with yourself throughout eternity. Let us then become progressively aware of the spiritual equipment which Providence has provided us for our protection and our development. We're endowed with creative intellects, with motivating imagination, with enduring zest and vitality, adventurous curiosity, aesthetic appreciation, insatiable ambition, and a sensitive balance wheel of conscience. But to fully and wisely realize and employ these endowments, we must do as Paul enjoined, and I read a word from his chapter. Take unto you the whole armor of God, that you may stand in the evil day, and having done all to stand. Stand therefore, having your loins girt about with the truth, and having the breastplate of righteousness, and your feet shod with the preparation of the gospel of peace. And above all things, taking the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked, and take the helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. I commend to you, young men and women of the graduating class, that you read frequently the 6th chapter of Ephesians, Paul's letter to the Ephesians. And although in this age science has made available to us almost miraculous material equipment, in the use of which you young people will develop some skills, still through it all you will find that there are certain basic needs which change not. They are, among other things, faith, courage, fortitude, and constancy. They're basic and they're indispensable, because you are entering into a relentless struggle which is called life. Even more than in Paul's day, you are going to have to wrestle with principalities and with powers, with the rulers of darkness in this world and spiritual wickedness in high places. The enemy is well organized, numerous and militant, and his fiendish and cunning leadership is of the devil. Of this you should be aware, and you must beware. Be aware of the increasingly more and be increasingly more worthy of your image nature. For of all of God's creations, only man was created in his image. He breathed into man the breath of life and planted in him the seed of godhood, and entrusted him at birth with a precious fragment of the divine mind, which would be developed and matured in the harsh soil of mortal life. Let each one then be aware of his ever-emerging best and cultivate a divine discontent and candid self-criticism. We're sent into this world to learn the meaning and purpose of life by active participation in the exciting drama of human existence. There are no benches, as in the baseball field, on which to vegetate, and no dugouts in which to hibernate. Our education, yours and ours, is just beginning, and this will always be true of all of us. We inherited, and we pass on to you, the greatest land of all the earth. And with it, the freedom that is vouchsafed in the Constitution, which is divinely inspired. Now, freedom cannot be static or passive. It must be active, nurtured, and maintained. Always remember that you hold this heritage in trust for those who are to follow you. Do not betray this trust. Become aware and partake of the glory which is America. Your Americanism should be, as a recent refugee defined it, a cry from the heart, a fire in the brain, a prayer in the soul. I take a word from Sunshine Magazine. God built a continent with glory and filled it with treasures untold. He bedecked it with soft, rolling prairies and pillared it with thunderous mountains. He studded it with sweetly flowing streams and mighty winding rivers. He graced it with deep shadowed forests, and he filled them all with song. But these treasures would have meant little if the myriads of people, the bravest of all the races, had not come, each bearing a gift and a hope. They had the glow of adventure in their eyes and the glory of hope in their souls. And out of them was fashioned a nation, blessed with a purpose sublime. They called it America. Beware, young people, of the infiltration of alien ideologies. Americanism and communism are as incompatible as light and darkness. Appreciate, however, the honesty, loyalty, and the patriotism of the vast majority of your fellow Americans, and do not impute to any of them motives meaner than your own. Remember that intelligent and honest men have honest differences. Refuse to join the hysterical pessimists whose colored goggles make blue look red, while white looks pink or yellow. Be temperate in all things. Stay on the highway which experience has built, and avoid the extreme right and the extreme left. There's danger on soft shoulders, and that could have a double meaning too. Detours are sometimes disastrous. Our individual dignity and self-respect are based upon, and our hopes and ambitions are justified by the fact that we are the offspring of deity. Young people, you cannot afford to forget that fact. It is permanently, unavoidably, and sometimes painfully true. That relationship makes it impossible to do wrong and feel right. Wickedness never was happiness, said the prophet. Now our goal is eternities ahead. And if we're going to keep on the beam, we must keep in touch with the tower. To paraphrase a familiar hymn, do not under any circumstances forget to pray. We need this balm of Gilead at the gates of every day. When sore trials come upon you, and they will, when your soul is full of sorrow, your heart is filled with anger, and you need grace to forgive another, in fact, in all of life's vicissitudes, you will need the comfort and encouragement and help which comes from communion with the divine, which is your source and your destiny. If you keep that contact with divinity, it will be a constant reminder of your derived and participative nature. It will enable you to retain your sense of purpose and direction. In an age that sneers at lessons of yesterday and mistrusts the future, you must humbly seek divine guidance, else your expectations will be engulfed in deep disillusionment. A sense of relationship and co-partnership with God involves the concept of universal brotherhood, and that will help to develop intelligent tolerance, open-mindedness, and good-natured optimism. Life is really a battle between faith and fear, between optimism and pessimism. You will need a sense of humor as you go along. If we are optimists in times like these, we must learn to smile. You young ladies will need a sense of humor if you marry these young men and try to live with them. Now, a sense of humor is indispensable. Golden Kimball once said, speaking to a conference in Granite State, and he was quite a humorist, it's before your time, he said, "I think God himself must like a joke. If he hadn't, he wouldn't have made some of you people." But your good humor should be real, not simulated. Your smile should come from the heart, and then it'll become contagious. You can see men on the street anytime whose laugh is just a frozen grin with nothing in it but teeth. Be genuine in your humor. Love life. Be aware of it, and thank God for it. Among the most imperative needs of every generation are faith and courage and fortitude and tolerance. And all of these will be developed and become adequate as you go forward. You will need courage, and that's more than lack of fear. Courage is meeting fear with firmness and fortitude. All the faint-hearted, I wish, would read again the words of Henry IV when he greeted Crillon after an important victory. He said, "Go hang yourself, brave Crillon. We fought at Arcs and you were not there." Physical and moral courage need not be conspicuous. We often misjudge one another in this realm. And here may I impose a little story to illustrate how we misjudge one another. This is the story of a man in the First World War. And if I admit I was there, I date myself. So I've not passed the time of dating. But in that war, there was in a certain regiment a man who seemed to have no feelings. He had no emotion. He was hard and harsh and unresponding. In fact, he came to be known as the unsentimental cuss. Some of us who didn't know him but thought we did, Pharisees we were, and we said in our hearts, because he was an officer, we didn't dare say it to him, but in our hearts we said, "We thank thee, God, that we're not like this man." You know, during that war, it was necessary occasionally for the officers to become censors of the mail, both the incoming and outgoing mail. One of the most delightful experiences in all of military life. There you meet tragedy and comedy and pathos and love. I remember one young man writing to his sweetheart, said many lovely things to her of how he loved her and said he hoped she was well and happy. He said, "I'm well and getting on fine. I'm getting fat, but I'm as lousy as a pet coon." And just at that moment, he was evidently called on duty. Because just after the words "as lousy as a pet coon," he scribbled quickly, "hoping this finds you the same." But one day, this unsentimental officer was reading the mail, and there came to his hand a letter from London, Ontario, Canada, from a Mrs. Jock Anderson. I remember part of that letter. She said, "Darling Jock, we're so proud to have you over there. The 10 little bairns are coming on pretty well, but I've had to wean the baby because of the work I must do outside the home. But Jock, darling, we're proud of you and where you are. And if it be God's will that you give your life, we'll make the sacrifice. But Jock, darling, our neighbor Mrs. Anderson received word a month ago that her husband was missing. Jock, join with me in a prayer to God that whatever else may happen, you'll never be listed as missing." She said, "Poor Mrs. Anderson is distraught and would rather have heard he was dead. She can hardly bear the suspense. It's driving her mad. Please, Jock, pray God you may never be listed as missing." And that evening, a sergeant and 6 men paraded before this same unsentimental officer. And on roll call, one of them answered to the name of Jock Anderson. They were going out into no man's land on a dangerous mission. The next morning, they reported back, the sergeant and 3 men. And they reported to this same officer. And when the roll was called, Jock Anderson did not answer. The officer asked the sergeant if he knew where Jock had fallen. He said yes, he was on a little rise in the hillside. German machine guns are trained on it. The officer said, "Would it be possible to crawl out there and get his identification disc? For you know, Sergeant, we can't report him dead unless we produce his body or his disc." The sergeant said, "It'd be suicide, sir, but if you say so, I'll try." The officer said, "Oh, no, I don't mean that." And that night, the officer was missing. No one knew where he had gone. But the next morning, they came up from the hospital behind the lines, a large envelope and a short letter. And it said, "Dear Major, I'm enclosing herewith the identification disc of Jock Anderson. Will you please write to Mrs. Anderson in London, Ontario, Canada, and tell her God heard her prayer. Her husband is not missing." And then he added, as though it didn't amount to anything, "As for me, I'm off to Blighty in the morning. The doctor says it's an amputation case and may prove fatal, but cheerio." And that was the man of whom we had said he had no feeling. And we thank God that we were not like him. Beware, young people, how you judge one another. Be dauntless in your pursuit of truth, and resist all demands for unthinking conformity. No one would have you become a mere tape recorder of other people's thoughts. Be modest, be teachable, seek to know the truth by study and by faith, and have respect for authority. but use your God-given minds and be unafraid to search for truth. Knowledge is most dependable and most complete when all points of view are heard. We're now introducing you into a world of restlessness and skepticism, where old things are not only being challenged, but they are disappearing. And we're introducing you into a world of miraculous achievement, undreamed of accomplishment, and terrifying power. A new world was born when Einstein's theory of relativity put us on the track of atomic energy and made atomic annihilation possible, said David Sarnoff. In our own lifetime, we adopted two little children of nature, the atom and the electron. We cannot see, touch, feel, or smell them, but we've seen and heard convincing evidence that they're here. They were not invented by man. They were discovered by or revealed to man. Science offers us wonderful tools for helping to create a brotherhood among the men of the earth, but the cement of brotherhood does not come from any laboratory. It must come from the heart and the mind and the spirit of man. Another quote from Sarnoff. As we rest, he said, more and more secrets from nature. And I hope you'll note this, young people, because this is a great scientist speaking of the evidences the scientists are finding that there is a God. As we wrest more and more secrets from nature and transmit them into service for mankind, the logic and rhythm of life take on more meaning. The myriads of suns, of which our own is a single grain of sand on the Sahara, the majestic cycles of the celestial movements, the precise operations of natural law, these could not be regarded as mere accidents. Their harmonious relationship and their effects upon life on this planet cannot be comprehended by our mortal mentality. But the intuition beyond mere reason informs us that they are manifestations of a divine intelligence, the supreme architect of the universe. Science has no substitutes for the lessons of universal harmony embodied for mankind in religious teachings and moral precepts. It makes clear that material progress is a delusion unless it is put to the service of eternal spiritual values. The success of our own missionary work, which has been revitalized in every land, is evidence that a reaction is setting in this world. It's been largely one of cynicism, materialism, and false and uninspired theology and philosophy. And people have been perishing for lack of vision and hungering not only for food, but for the blessing of the soul. Peace and brotherhood can be achieved when science and religion join to create one world in its truest and greatest sense. Continue then to become acquainted with human experience through history and philosophy, science and poetry, art and religion. Every discovery of science reveals clearly a divine plan in nature, a remarkable harmony in the physical laws and processes of the universe, from the infinitesimal to the infinite, that surpass mortal understanding. Beware also of man's monumental capacity for mischief and his tendency to lose sight of values. In these ominous times, moral values are more desirable than at any time, and they're more imperative. The survival of your race and your time and your generation depends upon the conscious cultivation of moral values. Education in the fullest sense is the entire process by which individuals and groups modify, redirect, stimulate, and control their native tendencies. Now we've spoken of wisdom. Wisdom may not be invoked. It should be entreated. It's not measured by knowledge or intellect alone, but it'll be reflected in your search for learning, in the scientist's search for facts, in the philosopher's search for understanding, and in every man's search for truth. Learn then to stretch your minds by constant preparation. Enrich your spirits by constant prayer. Increase your stature by companionship with great people and great books. Thus may your potential godlike status become real and actual to your ever-increasing intelligence, which is the glory of God. There is a duty imposed on some of us to bear witness. I'd come back to the beginning and say, those of us who stand near the exit are concerned for those of you who are across the stage at the entrance. I want to leave a witness with you tonight, and I speak that which I do know. God is a reality. Christ is real. He is our Savior, our Redeemer, and our friend. I bring you that testimony, and I know it, as did Peter of old know it when he replied to the Christ, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." Another duty imposed on us is to bless the people. Oh God, bless the members of this graduating class, that each of them may become aware of his potential, that each one may have ideals and hopes and aspirations, that none may make the fatal mistake of immorality and of sin. God bless you, young people, that you may be equal to that future of which some of us almost envy you. I leave that blessing with you and that testimony humbly. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen.